I accept who I am.
And who are you?
I'm the bad guy.
Morality is a strange thing. How do we define what makes a person good or bad? Do we just judge their actions? Do we factor in their intentions, or how they feel about what they've done? For the most part, we tend to judge someone's moral character based on harm. Do they care about others' well-being? How far out of their way do they go to avoid inflicting pain? Essentially, do they carry a sense of duty to their fellow man? This is what makes Jesse Pinkman one of the most morally intriguing characters in Breaking Bad. From the outside looking in, it's easy to dismiss him as a self-interested drug dealer, but it's how Jesse navigates this criminal underworld that speaks to his own moral compass, his personal do's and don'ts. Unlike Walt, Jesse doesn't come across as particularly ambitious. He has limits and things he's just not willing to do for his own self-interest. But for someone who clearly feels the emotional weight of his actions, time and time again he finds himself having to make morally compromising decisions. He's not a killer, but he's killed. He's loyal, but willing to betray. He's all about fairness, but has no problem stealing. You could call him a hypocrite, that he wants to feel like the good guy while still doing wrong. However, unlike many other characters in the Breaking Bad universe, no matter what crime he commits, Jesse always pays the price, emotionally and physically, making him one of the most sympathetic characters in the series. So let's take a deeper look at the muddled morality of Jesse Pinkman, to see if we can determine whether or not, on balance, he's a good person. The first topic we have to discuss is Jesse's relationship with drugs. Like many other characters profiting out of other people's misery, Jesse Pinkman is happy to cook and sell crystal meth. He witnesses how negatively this physically affects his customers, but sees no issue in it, believing that as they're adults, it's their choice to use, and if it's not him they're buying from, it will just be someone else. But what sets Jesse apart from other dealers is that he uses himself. It's initially hard to say if this makes Jesse more or less moral, as he acknowledges that crystal does make him horrifically paranoid, yet still easily gets peer pressured back into using it, something that happens to so many others. So the culture of drug abuse he contributes to leads to his own suffering. Yet, because he is willing to use the product he creates, it does alleviate a sense of predatory behavior. Unlike Walt or Gus, he's not allowing you to do something he wouldn't do himself. However, Jesse sees the dark side of drug abuse when Jane dies. There are even moments beforehand when he sees the helplessness of her addiction as she argues with her father, who's clearly trying to look out for her well-being. Jane's death completely breaks Jesse, increasing his drug use until he ends up in rehab. Now you would think this would change Jesse's perspective, maybe make him not want to cook anymore and live a clean lifestyle. But no, instead he develops a resentment for his fellow addicts, believing that they accept themselves too much despite what they've done wrong. You could interpret this as a sign that Jesse wants people to punish themselves as a means of doing better, as opposed to accepting their flaws. That at his core, he wants to be a better man. However, when he discovers that he and Walt only make a mere $3 million out of Gus's total of $96, he feels he deserves more. After all, he has to pay taxes. So he starts slinging again on the side, and the customers he targets are recovering addicts, people that are actively trying to better themselves. So it's clear that witnessing Jane's downfall has taught Jesse nothing. He has no sense of responsibility to his fellow man. A point that's further emphasized when he has no cash to pay for gas and he dishonestly tries to trade a bag of meth for it, luring her in by downplaying the drug's addictive properties.
But that stuff's really addictive, right?
Not really. It's just a media thing.
Moments like this really highlight the immorality of Jesse Pinkman. He understands the downside of drugs better than anyone, yet he's still happy to facilitate more and more people's addiction to make himself feel better about his own. This may make his job of cooking and dealing less hypocritical, but also showcases his ruthless self-interest. He's willing to play the bad guy whenever it suits, with little to no care for those he's harming. Which leads us into another confusing aspect of his morality. his relationship with money. Jesse initially only gets into cooking because he has no other prospects. When he tries to go the straight and narrow and get a job in sales, he's told his education only qualifies him to work as a human sign holder, and Jesse believes he's capable of more. Ever since his woodwork teacher genuinely asked him if this was the best he could do, he felt a need to prove that he can do great things when he puts his mind to it. So he applied that same attitude to cooking meth, as that's the only other lucrative avenue available to him. But Jesse isn't an honest broker. He puts his own needs first, and given they're trading an illegal product, he sees no issue with stealing the methylamine necessary to create it. No matter who it is, Jesse instinctively rebels against any authority figure. For instance, when his former teacher Walt gave him $7,000 to buy an RV, for no other reason than pure selfishness, Jesse spends most of the money out partying to impress his friends, then lets Combo steal an RV from his mother for the remainder of the cash. And when he learns that Gus is only paying them a tiny fraction of the product's worth, despite being paid handsomely, he starts skimming off the top to make some extra cash by selling to the recovering addicts in his group. However, this appears to be because it intrudes on Jesse's sense of fairness. They're the ones doing most of the work, yet most of the money is going straight to the top. So he believes that the workers should be paid equitably for their contribution, although he never factors in the cost of building the lab in the first place. Which is why in Season 5, unlike Walt, he's happy when they're getting a bigger piece of the pie, even if they make less money overall. As to him, that's what's fair. But as selfish as a lot of Jesse's decisions appear, he clearly feels a sense of guilt about the money he earns, which is why he's so generous with it. For example, he has Saul give money to Andrea so she and Brock can move to a better neighborhood. He also supplies money and drugs to all the addicts in his house who obviously can't afford to keep up this lifestyle on their own. Although sometimes he looks like he's just enjoying the power of watching them scramble across the floor. And when Walt finally pays him his share, after seeing what he did to Mike's men, and therefore probably Mike too, he doesn't want anything to do with this blood money. So he tries to get Saul to give it to Mike's granddaughter and the family of the boy Todd shot. And once that avenue of restitution fails, he starts tossing the money out his car window all over Albuquerque. This showcases Jesse's remorse more clearly than anything else. After acting out of self-interest for so long, he now wants to be a better man. He wants to make it up to the world around him. He wants to take it all back. Unlike Walt, Jesse never really cared about being super rich or even powerful, and after all the pain and suffering he's witnessed by Season 5, he now prioritizes peace over everything else. Which is why when Walt and Mike bicker over money, he offers to give up some of his share to make up the difference, as he would rather make less money if it means there's less conflict. Which ties into the most critical component of Jesse Pinkman's morality: violence. Although Jesse likes to play a tough guy, most viewers would say that he's not inherently violent, as whenever he hurts another human being, it visibly eats away at him. However, when it comes to self-defense, Jesse feels no such issue. Whether it's Tuco, who already beat him within an inch of his life,
It is him or us, you understand? It is him or us!
shooting the cartel member who was firing at him and Mike, or taking satisfaction in seeing Hank had been shot after he laid his hands on him. This shows us that Jesse has a vindictive streak. Like most of us, he likes to see bad things happen to who he believes are bad people, and that's really what it comes down to. Who Jesse perceives as guilty, those who have personally done him wrong. This is why Jesse holds a special place in his heart for the innocence of children.
No! No!
Given Jesse has a younger brother, he has a naturally protective instinct for kids, even taking the blame for Jake's secret pot habit. But this is what's so interesting about Jesse's morality. He's non-violent unless it's taking revenge for harming a child. Adults he can let slide, and to some degree even harm himself, but if it's a child, there's nothing he won't do to protect their innocence. For example, after planning to sell drugs to recovering addicts, once he discovers Andrea has a son, he retracts his offer and actually condemns her for even considering getting high when she's meant to be setting an example. When he finds out Gus's men are using 11-year-olds to do their dirty work, he feels morally driven to risk his own life to kill them and set things right, which is strikingly noble for a drug-dealing criminal who's helped dispose of multiple dead bodies. When he suspects Walt may have poisoned Brock, he's willing to shoot him as revenge. And then when Walt makes him think it was Gus, despite helping to save his life in Mexico mere episodes ago, he's now content to help take him out. And when his train heist idea results in Todd shooting a young witness, he's so disgusted that he's willing to walk away from the business for good. All of this paints a picture of someone who doesn't really belong in the darkest corners of the criminal underworld. So then how did he end up here? Part of what makes Jesse a decent person and such a terrible criminal is how loyal he is to his friends. For instance, when Badger gets arrested, and they take Saul to the desert to prevent him from cutting a deal with the DEA, Saul suggests that the simplest solution would just be to kill Badger, which is what most hardened cartel members would do. But to his credit, Jesse can't imagine ever doing that, even if it risks him getting caught. Now you might think, well, this is just because Badger never hurt anyone. But Jesse displays a similar level of loyalty to the murderer Mike Ehrmantraut, protecting him when he's in danger and even trying to give his money to his granddaughter after he was killed. And although he and Walt rarely see eye to eye, he reciprocates Walt's loyalty to him by refusing to work for Gus if anything were to ever happen to Walt. But despite his partner saving his life multiple times, there's no denying that Walter White is the primary source of Jesse's immorality over the course of the show. I mean, just imagine if Walt never reconnected with Jesse. He would never have moved beyond being a low-level dealer. He's not that ambitious. But under his influence, he's pushed to do things he would never normally do.
I can't do it, Mr. White.
For example, when Skinny Pete was robbed by a couple of addicts, Jesse didn't care, until Walt insisted that he needed to scare people into compliance by taking revenge. So Jesse then has to act out of character by intimidating them with a gun. But even then, when he's meant to be playing this big bad wolf, he never kills anyone. In fact, his need to protect the Peekaboo Kid from the horrors of his parents leads to him being cracked over the head and put in danger. And then once the mother squashes the father's head with an ATM, Jesse tries to protect the kid again by shielding him from the crime scene, and was even the one to call the cops. And then once it's a choice between Gale or Walt, although he said he can't do it, accepting that he's just not a killer, once the decision has to be made fast, instinct takes over. And given Walt had just displayed his loyalty to Jesse by taking out those two goons, Jesse reciprocates his loyalty by murdering Gale. Now you could maybe call this a form of self-defense, as Jesse was also wanted by Gus at that stage of the story, but it was mostly just a decision between Walt and Gale, both drug dealers, both criminals. But unlike Walt, Gale had never physically hurt anyone. He was just as guilty as Jesse was, perhaps even less so, which is why Jesse struggles to forgive himself and falls back into drug use as a coping mechanism. And I think this is what gets Jesse off the hook once again.
So no matter what I do, hooray for me because I'm a great guy?
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but Jesse's Breaking Bad story is a story of redemption. Unlike other characters, who either don't care about their sins or have to learn to accept themselves for what they've done, Jesse is always tormented by his past and wants to make things right. He wants to wash away his sins by getting rid of whatever blood money he has left. And once he discovers Walt was the one who poisoned Brock, whatever shred of loyalty he had left vanishes. And he then does the one thing that was never even considered a possibility before. He confesses to law enforcement, hoping to see Walt behind bars and all his money seized. And as his final act, when he finally gets the chance to kill Walt, just like he dreamed about, he knows that on some level, taking his life will just eat away at his conscience more, as he did just save his life. So he leaves Walt to do it himself, taking his integrity with him and proving that he now intends to live by the moral compass he should have been following all along. So while Jesse Pinkman is far from perfect, at his core, I believe he's a good person who's just done terrible things. He could have amounted to more if he wasn't such a passenger in his own life, but he followed the crowd and got led astray. But for every crime he's committed, he's always paid the price. If he got others addicted to drugs, he also got addicted himself and lost the love of his life. If he called to Gail's door and shot him in the dead of night, he had to witness Todd do the same thing to Andrea. If he made his millions by doing wrong, he tried to give it all away to make things right, and even served time as a tortured prisoner working for free. So while Jesse may have never really believed in rehabilitation, by the end of Breaking Bad, it's hard to view him as anything other than fully reformed. Well, if you've made it this far, firstly, thank you for watching, but if you could now give the video a like, possibly even leave a comment and click on that subscribe button, it will encourage that mysterious algorithm to do its thing.